Hi guys, and welcome to another edition of the Catalysr podcast. Today we're here with myself, Brendan, and Vivek, and today we'll be interviewing Brian Lim. And Brian has a focus on deep tech and its value in global transformation. So he's supported more than 1,000 startups across 100 market verticals. He's also worked in over 6 continents. So just Antarctica to go.
Yes, Antarctica left on the board, yes.
Very good. So he's founded multiple companies, 2 which are in the space industry, and he's raised more than $5 million US for his companies. So he's mentored for the World Food Programs Incubator program, and he was also the entrepreneur in residence at the Singularity University Incubator's 2018 cohort. So Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously, this profile reads like something out of Marvel Comics. A lot of crazy stats. It's a bit Tony Stark-ish, I would say.
I don't have the beard.
But I mean, just hitting on the 1,000 startups, it's really hard, I guess, to get my head around that. How did you end up working with 1,000 startups? What are the, I guess, things that you look for when you engage with one of these startups?
Well, here's a quick part. I'll actually tell you it's actually more than 1,000, but I've stopped counting.
Wow.
And the reason why I say that is I joined a co-working space in Sydney called Fishburners. It's a non-for-profit co-working space more than 7 years ago. And I became the volunteer IT manager. And I started back then knowing nothing about entrepreneurship. It's, oh, teach me, great one. You're making Tinder for cats and dogs to fight. So I said, yep. So I was really learning a lot about how the entrepreneurs work. So all I did was I first swapped my skill in keeping the internet running. And in exchange, people taught me a little bit about their business, and I learned a lot from there. And what happened actually is since then, I've gone from learning from them to teaching all the newcomers. And over 7 years, Fishburners actually went through 1,000 startups that I've actually sat down and talked with every single one of them. Oh. And I've shared my advice with all of them in that capacity. And that was before I went on like a warpath to travel the world to go do things. And so I have honestly spoken, advised, and supported more than 1,000 startups in God knows what categories anymore. Oh. You know, and literally like 6 continents, and I'm still wondering whether I have the 7th, but I haven't figured out the maths on that one yet.
Right. You were saying before that New Zealand is now considered a continent.
Yes. So technically I have 7 out of 8 continents now. Wow. So I could say 7 continents on the paperwork.
Slightly better percentages.
Exactly, slightly better.
Push the numbers up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And I mean, obviously you're a migrantpreneur as well. Yep. Mm-hmm. So coming from overseas, what were some of those early challenges that you had to overcome?
I came over in 2002. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Singapore, so I had just finished my national service, which is a conscripted military service in Singapore. And I was coming in with like, I'm just trying to figure out how to make this work. I wasn't doing well in my studies in Singapore. So I was here just like, let me study, let me do well. I had at least had a good command of English, so it was easy to communicate. But I had a really low self-esteem because I couldn't make it in the Singapore system, so I had to come here. Right? And you know, when you have to be picked up away from all your friends and family to go somewhere else, it suddenly is like really lonely. You don't know what to expect. There's a lot of like these little things, you know, and all that little stress. And that was really a difficult time of just trying to figure it out. And as I did the work, got to know people, it did get easier. And thank God for my command of English, because I know a lot of people who had trouble with commands of English. And I was like, phew.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, having the command of English is obviously a great skill. I mean, did you find any challenges when you first came here, and particularly when you were starting out and before you got to Fishburners?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say back then my England was very powerful.
Right.
It certainly improved since then. A lot of challenges I had was like when I was trying to get a job, nobody would give me a job because I didn't have the right visa situation, and so it was like I had gone through my degrees, I had done my master's, I had published research papers in medical sciences, and they go, we can't give you a job in anything because you're a migrant.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was really hard to actually get a job. And what I remember sitting down is like, so I had my degree, my master's, I had saved a PhD from failure, and that's how I ended up publishing 6 papers in medical census. And nobody would give me a job other than making cold calls to go sell stuff. So I'd pick up the phone and go, would you like to... I haven't said anything yet. You know, so I did that for 18 months and I went, no, not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I said, if nobody's going to give me a job, I'm going to make my own.
Wow.
And that's when I joined the entrepreneur community 7-8 years ago. And I swapped whatever I knew for teach me something. And it was just a lot of work because I had no sense of business. My ideas were horrible. I say that now because I have foresight, thank God. But my ideas were horrible back then.
Can you tell us a couple of those ideas that you had?
So maybe I can run with them instead.
Yeah, I was trying to find a girlfriend back then, so I was trying to figure out how to build a CRM for dating.
Or your own personal CRM?
Yeah, my own personal CRM for dating. Wow. Didn't get very far because I couldn't get any dates. So I realized in that particular case, my entrepreneur skill wasn't as important as just trying to figure out how to be an actual human being with a social skill.
Yeah, wow.
So I just went back. I sat down. I actually started like 10 different businesses. I was trying to figure out how to do a job board for people to get recruitment. I actually went on the berserk and I actually bought those scan ECGs you would put in your head to try and measure to do stuff. Couldn't do anything with it, but I did figure out the science on how to measure creativity.
Okay.
But I couldn't commercialize it. So I had all these crazy ideas and I ended up more in the crazy tech department. And I was like, no idea how to commercialize it.
Yeah, wow.
So that was 10 startups worth. And 10 companies I had to shut down, and I was sitting there like, oh my God, what do I do now? I feel like a failure. It's been 2 years of all these attempts. So I was having beers with a friend and he was like, Brian, you know, you've been at this for so long, you haven't gotten anything. What do you actually want to do? And I had the beer in hand, I was like, and I go, space. And everybody cracked up because no space agency, no space entrepreneurship, nothing was back then, right? And they all goes like, Brian, you can't even get a business off the ground and you want to do space? Like, we don't even know where to start. But they were kind enough to let me try because I helped everybody out.
Where did that initial inspiration for space come from? Were you a Star Trek fan, Star Wars, Space Jam as a kid?
And please don't say it was because I was 9 beers deep. And on the 10th one I just said space.
There's nothing left up here anyway, so there's a lot of space left. Well, so certainly a childhood desire when I did grow up watching Star Wars, Star Trek. Come on, well, every space geek has to admit one or the other. I'm admitting both now.
Which Star Trek?
Which Star Trek?
Yes.
I watched all of them, and I have to say I'm a fan of the Next Generation. And what the character I really enjoyed was Data, because he was just like walking Wikipedia that had no social life, and that resembled a lot like what I was dealing with. So I latched on and I said, okay, let's give it a go. Let's figure it out how to do stuff. But the real click that came was not whether I was doing space or any of the other startups, was what can I do for you, right? And that's a very basic skill as an entrepreneur. You need to know what your customer wants. And when it clicked for me, I was like, okay, how can I use space to help customers? Or should I say people? And actually, believe it or not, that is probably the hardest question I had to ask. Because if I make an app, here, would you like to download my app? It helps dogs find fire hydrants. But in space, it's like, so what can you use a satellite for? I don't know. Like, there was no connection. So if I ask around, people goes like, I have no idea. Go walk into a coffee shop. What'd you use a satellite for? Like, what are you trying to do? You know? And then I learned that people use like different services, but they don't deal with the space part, they deal with the downstream. Right. And so I was like, okay, I have to ask the impossible question. I'm asking an impossible question, and this is where my learning really skyrocketed, is how do I take something in the space industry and make it relevant to consumers?
Right.
And while I haven't gotten to that point, what it has taught me, this is immense depth of what is required to take something so immense and make it relevant, and how to build products and services that actually build value to people.
Right. Yeah. Really interesting. And I guess how are you evangelizing your next frontier mission to the general public?
The next generation.
The box set of next generation.
I actually have to say that my current I'm taking a little bit of a break from space. Not because I don't like space, or I still want to do space, but I have realized that it is more important to solve the problems people are facing now with tools we can build now. Anything I can do in space that will make the impact is 5, 7, or 10 years of actual building. And yes, this is the actual business case numbers you will find in any space startup. And anything you find more than 10, they never survive, right? So I'm trying to build things that are more relevant now, that deal with issues around like climate change, agriculture, issues around clean water, refugees and migrants, and so forth.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, given that you've had that bit of break from space and you're looking to move into different areas, is there any advice that you'd have, given that your journey's been quite substantial, it's been quite varied and storied, to migrapreneurs who are looking at this and saying, well, how can I do that?
My basic advice I would tell everybody is do something impressive. Because if you, on the slim chance you make it, you have done something impressive. But if you haven't, you've at least learned something impressive.
Wise advice.
Yeah.
Solid.
And as long as you keep doing it, it stacks up.
Yeah, wow.
That's really valuable. Yeah. And I guess being involved with first fish burners and then moving on to Catalysr as well. I mean, what lessons have you learned from these accelerators, and I guess the over 1,000 startups that you've advised, like the main patterns that you see?
I think the first thing I will say is you're not alone. Every entrepreneur feels really lonely in their journey. And after going through that many entrepreneurs, everybody has the same crap. Honestly, everybody goes through the same whatever 30, 40 crap items you deal with in life. And once you know how to deal with the 40, you don't have to worry about anything and you will never be lonely. All right? Every business is different, but every business is the same at the end of the bottom line is get cash in, survive, go, right? The question is how long you take. And the how long part you take actually deals more with the entrepreneur than with the sales cycle. Because what I've realized is that one's ego is the biggest threat to your own company's survival.
Very interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I can say everything else. It can be about timing, and we can go through all it. But end of the day, you're building something. This is your baby, and once it starts to sprout and grow, you go, look at me. And if you let that get the better of you, you kill it.
Yeah, right.
It's like the shade to the seed.
And do you find that as a migrapreneur, and potentially for migrapreneurs out there, because of the hardships that you've had to face as your initial sort of buy-in to actually getting into it or getting into the Australian startup scene, do you find that ego threat is accelerated? Because once you taste a little bit of success, you start to just go, wow, I finally made it.
I actually find that migrantpreneurs are more humble about it.
Okay.
Because they have a different perspective. So regardless of your social status when you got here, you all ended up in the same place as a migrantpreneur in the sense that you didn't have any friends. You came into a place which now is your new home, and you didn't know what to expect per se. And you don't know you don't even know how to go out and get a drink at which bar. These are like things you handle, right? So you actually come in without that baseline. But people who have grown up here, they have gone through primary school, they've gone through high school, they have friends, they have all that fallback position. You don't. So you've already I have to deal with this regardless of my social status. right? And you also bring with you the perspective of your home country. And I find the migrant entrepreneurs who bring the parts that they have learned from overseas here actually become successful, because you would learn traits and behaviors on how to deal with certain skills or certain moral values and beliefs that actually add value to the Australian culture or to whatever country you're in. And if you can leverage that right, you actually build something for yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Never thought of it like that. Yeah. And I mean, going back to your incredible bio, speaking of these startups, I mean, you've worked in over 100 market verticals. So, I mean, a question I had, I guess, learning how to learn. How do you get across so many different areas? And I mean, migrapreneurs and entrepreneurs and the Catalysr cohort. I mean, we have to learn new skills every week, fast changing environment. I mean, what are some of your tips to get across different areas quickly?
So I subscribe to Warren Buffett's opinion to read. And I have read through about 600 books over the last 7 years, and I'm on track to do about 50 books every year now.
Wow.
And like Warren Buffett says, reading is like compound interest. You just grow, right? So constantly keep reading. That's like an ultimate unique advantage. Anyone can do, but nobody will try. So you have that knowledge base. And what I have realized is that you read a lot and learn a lot. When you walk into a new market that you don't know anything about, you can draw on so many experiences that are similar and knowledge that when you ask questions, this is the funny thing. When you ask questions with a lot of knowledge, you don't get one answer. You get like 50 in your brain, and you have to filter out which one makes sense. But you know what the 50 are. So you are actually getting 50 times, 100 times more information out of every answer than anyone else.
Wow.
So I'll give a quick example. If you come to me, if you ask me the question, for example, say, Brian, will you buy a cup of coffee from my shop down the road? And I go, I don't really drink a lot of coffee, but why are you asking me in the first place? Let's say that is my answer. This is what it has already told you. You're in an area where part of your sample size actually doesn't drink coffee. On a random luck draw of the first person you talk to would imply that he could potentially be the majority of people in the area. 2, is like, though I'm across the road, I did not even think about you having anything else. I only responded to your coffee. So it means 2 things. 1, A, I'm extremely focused on answering your response, which either means I am busy, or 2, I don't bother about other things you present, or I don't think about it. That's a lot of information right there.
Yeah.
So when you think about all the other things that you could get out of a person, a lot of people try to ask 100 questions. That's the wrong way. It's how to ask the one question that gives you 100 answers.
Wow.
And do you think going through all of your startups, that has been
Yes.
a real defining factor, the ability to ask one question and then have the ability to see 100 answers when you're actually evaluating them or giving them advice?
Exactly. And that's whatever happens. And whenever someone comes to me, like you had a previous person on the podcast was working on diamonds, right? So she was talking about diamonds for jewelry. And immediately on her conversation, I could tell there's uses in medical applications, there's useful in power transmission, there's use cases for actually sensor development that you can think of straight away. But then the other half you could hear in the conversation is, all right, we have access to all these diamonds. What does the market transfer? She talks about how people don't want to buy fake diamonds. But then I'm going like, that's completely wrong. People don't care about fake or real. That is a marketing thing from the historical records of the diamond industry. So when you know that history, then you know how to actually build a marketing plan that cuts through the long-term cultural norm that was placed by that industry.
Right.
So how much can you pull out of very little people say and do is actually the real skill.
Wow. And speaking of skills, you're renowned for your unconventional and out of the box thinking?
I believe so.
So, I mean, for entrepreneurs out there, migrantpreneurs, I mean, obviously it's good to be creative and have out of the box ideas to get exposure and cut through. I mean, what are some of the inspirations, I guess, maybe besides books or different mentors that you use in that area?
I subscribe to the concept called the 4 beautiful minds. The first one is loving kindness, which is, loving and kind and being kind to everyone. Then there's empathetic joy, which is to share in one's joy, and then empathy, to share in one's suffering. And the last one is equanimity, which means to treat everything with calm and level head and treat everyone equally. Now, the reason why this is of value to everyone, and it answers your question, is because when you get to know someone, you develop this deep empathetic rapport, you just want to help them. And when you really do want to help these people, you naturally want to be of service to them. And when you listen to them deeply, you will know what they're actually dealing with, and you want to help them in achieving these things. And that is really where entrepreneurs are going to find exactly what they need to do. Because at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is all about service.
Amazing. And I guess speaking of service, if an entrepreneur is trying to approach a high-level advisor or mentor as yourself, what's the best way for them to go about that?
I would really just say start off with being authentic. If you want to build a startup that has like 12 zeros in your bank account, tell people about it. If you want to help 1 billion people in the world, tell people about it. Be honest. Don't be afraid to share what you want to do. There will be others who are interested. You want the mentors who actually will pay attention to you, right? The second thing I will say is ask a busy person to be your mentor, all right? Because busy people get things done. If they are not doing too much work, then are they actually a good mentor? We got to ask some questions, because the really good people are always busy doing something. And the third comment I would make on that is find someone who will be just as honest and authentic with you as you are with them. Because if you can't get the real truths, because it's the truth that will set you free, if you can't get those truths, you will never grow and you will never actually accomplish what you want to do.
Wow. Yeah, right. Can I challenge you on that though? Do you think that it's necessary for an micropreneur to have a mentor? Because some people, a lot of the times you've spoken about previously that you've gone through a lot of these experiences and gone through a lot of struggles at times where you might not necessarily have had someone to give you advice, and that might have developed some sense of resilience, might have developed some sense of thinking on your feet. Do you think there are circumstances where not having a mentor is very beneficial?
Name me any successful person that you know of, or famous person, that did not have a mentor.
I could not name one in my very quick search.
And you will never find one. That's really it. Every successful person in the world had someone that they could turn to, could ask the questions, and honestly sometimes break down and cry and go, I don't know what I'm doing, someone tell me. And you go, wake up, you're okay.
It's happened to you before, it's happened to other people.
Exactly, yeah. That's it, basically. There's not a single successful person in the world I know that does not have a mentor. Not a single person.
Yeah.
Who are your mentors?
Well, of course, my parents have taught me when I was a kid. I consider myself very lucky to have Peter Davison as my mentor. He's the seed investor for PayPal. He was one of the people who founded Fishburners. So when I did a lot for Fishburners, he also did a lot to help me. I consider a lot of my mentors to come from Singularity University as well. I've learned from Peter Diamandis, Ray Kurzweil, a lot about life. And I still have friends who I turn to and go, I'm okay, someone help me, I don't know what I'm doing. And if you think I sound wise, holy sheesh, they sound wiser.
Just touching on Singularity University, really interested to hear some of your key takeaways and lessons that you learned there.
Yeah. To sum up Singularity University, they believe that there's an exponential change coming. And that is led predominantly by technology, which is changing exponentially or highly disruptive at an ever-increasing pace. What I learned there was this technology will actually change the world. But because of that, no one knows, there are no real experts anymore.
No.
Anyone who says they're expert in any of these things are only an expert because they've effectively studied it for 6 to 12 months. Because it changes so quickly that you can't keep pace. So if you can keep up with all these changes in the fields you want to be involved in, you actually can make the difference. It's your leverage. We've gone from a society where everybody had to be farmers, while now the minority are farmers because we have built technologies and capabilities to extend our productivities by so much. And that's what's happening again.
And Singularity University is at the forefront of that change.
Yes.
Wow.
Really inspiring.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, covered a lot of topics today.
Yeah.
You've gone from the 1,000 startups. You've advised, gone to 7 or 8 continents, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
A lot of valuable lessons, getting a mentor. I mean, if there's one sort of final takeaway or piece of advice you want to give to the Catalysr cohort or our potential migrantpreneurs who might be thinking of applying for the Catalysr cohort, what would that be?
There's greatness in every single one of us to want to do more, to do better. Whether you're doing a small project or to do a big project, the greatness is because of the people you want to make a difference for. And if you think about that for a moment, the greatness you want to give the world does not give you the luxury of modesty. So if you are wanting to do something great and you're modest about it, no one will hear about it. No one will know you even did it. So be great and don't be modest about it. Be authentic, be real, and really do it.
Well, it's good actionable advice to end the
absolutely.
podcast.
It's almost like a Nike ad, just do it. I did have one. I did promise you one fun question, which I will just sneak in. You're on a desert island.
Yes.
To give you context, though, you've read 50 books. You say you read 50 books a year. You're obviously a voracious reader.
Yeah.
If you're on a desert island, which book would you take? You can't get out.
Which book will I take?
Which book would you take?
The one with the whiskey bottle?
Hey, there we go.
Okay, so the book that I would really actually, it's a not well-known book. It's called The Science of Social Influence.
That is an interesting one to be on a desert island with.
If there was ever a book I needed to rescue and hold on a desert island, that will be the one I pull out. That's, by the way, the only book that I have in hard copy that if I lose, I will buy again instantly. I pre-purchased digital copies that I've stored in 12 locations.
12 locations?
Yeah. I will never lose that book. Period.
Who is it written by?
I cannot remember the author for the life of me at this very moment in time.
The Science of Social Situations.
The Science of Social Influence. Think of it this way. In chapter 2, there is an index of over 150 tactics on how to influence people.
Wow. More than Dale Carnegie gave?
Yeah, wow. That's significantly more.
It's a literature study of the entire field of science of social influence. So all the chapters are basically a literature review of each part of persuading people, breaking down resistance, how to make people understand you, and convincing them.
Wow.
Very interesting.
All very useful traits on a desert island.
Completely useful. Dear coconut tree, please give me your fruits.
That didn't work. I've got 149 to go. We're going to be here a long time.
Exactly. It's also pretty thick, so it makes good firewood.
Well, again, Brian, thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
Really busy guy, which makes you a good mentor as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, really looking forward to hearing more about your journey and hopefully having you back on the podcast soon.
It will be a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for tuning in, and everything that Brian mentioned will be in the show notes below, and hope to see you next week on the Catalysr podcast. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey team, thanks for tuning in to that podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Catalysr. Catalysr is an award-winning pre-accelerator program for refugees and migrants who wish to start their own startup.
If you're interested in applying for the Catalysr program, you can head to the website catalysr.com.au, find out a bit more about what we do. Thanks so much for tuning in.